Hey there! Before we start the podcast, I need you to put down that wave bird and listen up. I need money. For a tenth of what the price of that wireless GameCube controller costs, that should be like $5 if you got it off Shop Goodwill. You can support me here at the podcast of Two Consoles Too Late. I need to buy more games. Your support gets bonus content like additional episodes, Discord server access, typewriter manifestos, and personal shoutouts on the airwaves. I actually have a typewriter. So I've decided to make the Patreon free, so all those bonus podcasts and typewriter manifestos, you can have them for free. But if you do support this podcast monetarily, I still will send you a signed postcard, a signed trading card, a Miracle of Save States magnet, and a shout out on the airwaves. Anyway, let's get back to the podcast. Hello and welcome to the Two Consoles Too Late podcast. I'm the host, Jackson Keebler, and I am Two Consoles Too Late. What does that mean? Here at this podcast, we look at the classics and not so classics of retro gaming, often for the very first time with no nostalgia. And today on episode 149, we're looking at WipeOut for the Sony PlayStation. A title that defined the system's identity and set a new standard for what video games could look, sound, and feel like in the mid-90s. We're also going to have Going Long and Auction Alert. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's go.
Going long. It is going long. Looking long. Going long. It is going long. Looking long.
All right, Going Long. What's going on with the PS1 long box collection? Well, I just acquired Battle Arena Toshiden 2. You can check that out on the Instagrams. I've yet to play it. I'm not sure if I'm going to live stream it this Saturday. Every Saturday morning, I live stream a game from the long box collection. The past two live streams have been WipeOut, but after this podcast, I'm done with WipeOut for a while, so not sure what it's going to be. If you have any thoughts, hit me up, and I'll see if I can make that happen, provided I have the game. That all being said, if you head on over to the patreon.com/2consoles2late, I just did an episode of the Going Long podcast talking about Tron Ares. You can hear my wonderful Raven review over at the Patreon. And there's a couple games I'm after, but I'm going to wait to talk about those on Auction Alert later in the podcast. Now, what I love about doing this podcast is I get to learn things. And while it isn't knowledge that empowers the mind or anything great, I get to learn about the little nuances of retro gaming. And what did I learn from WipeOut? I learned two things. One, I had no idea that you could link two original PlayStations together using a link cable. I had no idea that was a thing because there's a two-player option on WipeOut, but that's only possible if you link two PlayStations. So there, I learned one thing. So the little icon on the back of the box, it says link cable. I was like, what is that all about? So boom, check, learned one thing. Two, I learned what a Negicon controller is. I had no idea that this controller even existed. So I, of course, had to pick one up for myself in order to play WipeOut. So this podcast is going to be half game review and half tech review. Now, when it comes to racing games, I do have like a top 5. And I think that they're important racing games. Your list may be different. Let me know. Shoot me a comment. My top racing games, I guess in somewhat chronological order. Pole Position for the Atari and arcade. 2, Virtual Racing for the Sega Genesis. It was also on Saturn and 32X. Gran Turismo, although I like Gran Turismo 2 the best. I think most people do. And then Mario Kart. Which version in particular? I'm just going to have to go with the one, Mario Kart 8. But, they're all pretty much the same. Anyway, so that's kind of like my go-to list of racing games. So this is the first time I'm featuring a racing game here on the podcast. And I've been very reluctant to talk about a racing game because a lot of times there's just not a lot of content there. Because with a racing game, it's just, go in circles, get good, and then, unlock something. Which is pretty much the case with WipeOut, but not. WipeOut is a very different racing game, and we're going to talk all about that. Especially because its soundtrack is very different. All right, that is the track Cold Comfort by Cold Storage, also known as Tim Wright. And Tim Wright worked at Psygnosis and composed multiple tracks for the WipeOut soundtrack. So when it comes to electronic music, I just want to put this out there, a little disclaimer. I'm not an electronic music guy, all right? I cannot tell you the difference between house, techno, trance. It's all electronic to me. Does it have a good beat? Can you dance to it? That's about it. That being said, though, when this game came out, The Prodigy, I remember, was a big thing. And the album Fat of the Land, I think a lot of people bought that album. It's the one with the crab, with multiple hits like Breathe, Firestarter, and Smack My Bitch Up, which was a little controversial. And there's also a track on there called Climatized that I absolutely love. If you haven't heard it, check it out. So this past week, on my Apple Music, I've been listening to a lot of electronic music, trying to expand my horizons. And I haven't bought any albums. I did buy one Prodigy track, Out of Space. That's a good one. So anyway, but the reason I'm talking about electronic music is because the soundtrack of WipeOut is mostly trance, which made this game very, very different. And I asked the question before we start talking about the video game. I never went to a rave as a kid. Can you still go to a rave? Are raves still a thing, or is it all just festivals now? Question mark. I never really played around with the electronic music and that whole scene. I've never done ecstasy. Okay? Nope, no thank you. Club drugs, not doing it. But there is a big question mark on the name of WipeOut because the E in WipeOut is capitalized, and people wonder, is that for ecstasy? All right, let's roll the clocks back to September 29th, 1995. What is happening back then? Well, I am a junior in high school, and I went to a Catholic school that kept me away from the deviant ways of the young ladies already corrupting my youthful mind, along with punk rock music. So, WipeOut comes out September 29th, 1995. So, yes, this game is 30 years old, and we just missed the anniversary. I think we can just skip the whole part where we talk about the launch of the PlayStation. I think we all know about the history of the PlayStation. If you don't, go see the documentary Console Wars. There's even a documentary about the history of the PlayStation, how it had some beginnings with Nintendo. All right, we're just going to skip all over that and go straight into WipeOut and its development in the early 90s. WipeOut was developed by the studio called Psygnosis, and I'm probably going to trip on that name a couple times, so please forgive me. It's kind of a mouthful. But Psygnosis is a Liverpool-based studio, and they were known for, at this time, the game Lemons. Yes, they created Lemons. I think at some point we all played that game where they're lemons. You have to find creative ways to get them home. Anyway, so the conceptualization of WipeOut revolved around Psygnosis designer Nick Burcombe's idea of creating a racing game using the same types of anti-gravity vehicles featured in Powerdrome, a title first released on the Atari ST in 1988. The game's futuristic vehicle designs were influenced by a game being developed by Psygnosis employee Jim Bowers. He was developing a game called Matrix Marauders, and that was a 1994 Amiga 3D racing game. So a bit of a rip there. And the name WipeOut came from a pub conversation between Nick Burcombe and Jim Bowers. And the name came from the Surfaris song WipeOut, which I find very interesting given the soundtrack of WipeOut being nothing but trance. All right, so Psygnosis goes ahead and they make this racing game called WipeOut. And the beta version of WipeOut appears in the cult film Hackers. Now, I kind of was not surprised by this because I remember, first off, I love the movie Hackers, right? I don't know what they're calling me these days. Am I a Zennial? Okay. But people of my age, and having my proclivity for certain music and movies, have probably seen the movie Hackers. It's a wonderful film with a very young Angelina Jolie and a very young Johnny Lee Miller. If you haven't seen it, go see it. And the fact I don't own a copy, all I have to say to that is,
Stick it.
That's right. So before we get into the meat and potatoes of the video game itself, there's one little factoid I thought was really interesting. Maybe you knew it, maybe you didn't, but I'm going to share it here. The trance-inspired soundtrack of WipeOut came from Nick Burcombe, all right? He's sitting at home, he's playing Mario Kart, and he's trying to win like the 150cc or whatever. This is the original Mario Kart on the SNES. And he had to turn down the music because it was so annoying. And I can totally relate to that because I've done that numerous times where I'm trying to beat a boss or what have you, and the music of the game is just so annoying you got to turn it off. So he turns off the music and he starts playing what he's listening to, which is electronic music and trance. And by listening to that music, he's able to beat the 150cc of Mario Kart, which is sort of like the impetus of the game. Was like, okay, I'm going to create a game, a racing game, but I'm going to use this trance soundtrack instead. And there's going to be some sort of vehicular combat. So that's sort of a kernel of where the game WipeOut came from. So WipeOut is a futuristic racing game set in the year 2052. All right, so we have 27 years to go until this video game becomes a reality. 27 years. Hopefully it'll be here. Players control anti-gravity ships known as AG Craft, competing for different corporations in a league called the F3600 Anti-Gravity Racing League. That's a mouthful. The gameplay emphasizes precision and momentum. Each craft has unique attributes: acceleration, top speed, and handling. And every track is filled with speed pads, sharp turns, weapon pickups. Combat adds an extra layer of strategy. In WipeOut, your weapons include rockets, shockwaves, mines, and shields. And they can change the course of a race quite quickly. You can choose different companies and pilots, though I just chose the very first one that came up every time. I forget his name. It was like John Decca or something like that. But you can choose from 6 different pilots. The pilot ability, quote unquote, doesn't change the game. What changes the game is the AG Craft. And once again, I just played with the first one. I started playing with one of the crafts from like the Dynar company, and the handling was very different. And once it's like when I was playing Gran Turismo, you have your like go-to car, and then you get so used to that car that it's very hard to race in another car. Well, it's the same here with WipeOut. So I just played with the same AG Crap the whole time. The game WipeOut is a combination of speed and weaponry, and it introduced a tactical element that was somewhat uncommon in traditional racing titles. The controls were demanding, and without analog sticks on the original PlayStation controller, players had to rely on the D-pad, which required quick reflexes and memorization of the track layouts. Now, there was an option to use the Negicon controller, and this is another thing that I learned playing the game. So as I'm reading the manual, there's this little paragraph, and I shall read it here. WipeOut is fully compatible with Namco's Negicon and will be automatically detected when you insert the Negicon into controller port number 1. If you have a Negicon, you may choose from 4 different button configurations. There are a selection of 4 button presets to choose from. The buttons determine thrust, fire, deploy weapons, and air brakes. You may also select the Negicon twist values in the controller configuration screen. Once selected, turn the Negicon to the angle you feel comfortable with for maximum lock and press the I button. So, me being me, I had to go to the eBays and get myself a Negicon controller. And I had 2 options. There was a white one and there was a black one. And the ones that I was looking at were all being shipped from the United States. I didn't want to get one from Japan because I thought that would take forever. The black one was $15 more than the one that I got. Now, you can see my experience over at the YouTubes at 2 Consoles Too Late of playing this game with the Negicon. And it took me a while to know how to pronounce the name Negicon. I thought it was just Negcon, but it's Negicon. So anyway, I pick up one of these controllers, and my experience was very interesting. So after my 30-minute live stream on the YouTubes, my wrist was quite sore from all the twisting of the controller itself. And there's a screw hole on the right side of the controller which kind of kept cutting into my finger. And the number 1 button was very spongy, and I had to remap the controls so that the thrust button was one of the blue buttons. But even then, the thrust button, I think it's the A and the B button, they're the blue buttons. It felt like it was sort of cutting out. Like I would notice my acceleration just sort of suddenly decrease. So I'm thinking that my Negicon that I got from Retro Games Japan off eBay, I may have gotten a bum deal on my Negicon, but having the Negicon greatly helped my gameplay when playing WipeOut. All right, that was the track Karyodome from the distinctive soundtrack of WipeOut. Also distinctive was the look of WipeOut. Psygnosis partnered with Designers Republic, a Sheffield-based graphic design agency known for its work in electronic music and industrial design. The studio created logos, typography, and corporate branding for the in-game racing teams, giving WipeOut a unique visual identity. The fictional corporations Phisar, Auricom, AG Systems, and Curex each all had their own logos and colors adding depth to the world. This approach to world building through design was ahead of its time. It gave WipeOut a coherent visual language that extended beyond gameplay into advertising, box art, and even print campaigns. And in later games, Red Bull would have in-game ads as you went around the track. That was another thing that I learned. But the Red Bull ads, I believe, were in WipeOut XL, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But critics praised WipeOut for its speed, graphics, and audio design. Although the frame rate would occasionally struggle, the game's sense of velocity and style was unmatched. In Europe, WipeOut gained particular attention through cross-promotion in nightclubs and music magazines. Sony positioned the PlayStation as part of a modern youth culture, and WipeOut was central to that marketing strategy. Commercially, the game performed well enough to warrant sequels. The sequels were WipeOut 2097 in Europe. Here, it was known as WipeOut XL. Now, the reason they did that apparently was they thought that Americans wouldn't get the whole 2097 thing. I'm not sure if that's true or not. But here it's known as WipeOut XL. And there was WipeOut 3 in 1999. And each game refined the formula and improved the technical performance of the game. So I came to the WipeOut franchise, at least the first game, through my PS1 long box collection. That's how I came to it. When this game came out in the 90s, I don't have any recollection of it. I'd have no nostalgia of it. But I learned that it was kind of a big franchise. And Psygnosis, after being acquired by Sony, would later go on and release, like I said, WipeOut XL and WipeOut 3 for the PlayStation. And then it would go to the PS2 with WipeOut Fusion and the PSP with WipeOut Pure. And now you can get the WipeOut Omega collection on the PS4. But we're going to see if there's any copies of WipeOut there on the Shop Goodwills on Auction Alert.
Auction alert.
Any search on the Shop Goodwills for WipeOut most of the time brings up the video game adaptation of the shitty ABC game show WipeOut. And the only available copies of the game WipeOut in the franchise right now are WipeOut 3, a loose copy for the PlayStation. This is coming from the Goodwill of Central and Northern Arizona. Loose disc. The disc condition looks a little crappy. Comes with a shitty jewel case, and they have it at $18.99 with 6 days, 10 hours left on the auction, and 0 bids. Imagine that. I'm seeing this more and more on the Shop Goodwills that the starting price of these auctions are quite ridiculous, considering especially they gouge you on shipping. Okay, I did an episode that I thought Goodwill was good. Well, that opinion's changing, and more to Goodwill, I'm just having to say, stick it, because you're getting a little greedy these days. So that's the only copy of WipeOut currently available. Now, a sold copy of WipeOut Fusion and WipeOut XL went off on the Shop Goodwills, and it went off at $9.99. So 2 games for $10. I really regret not picking those up. I don't know why I didn't, and I'm having some FOMO on that one. But when it comes to the PS1 long box collection, I'm looking at 2 long box games currently on the Shop Goodwills. One is Road Rash. It's complete in box. Condition looks great. It's coming from the Goodwill of Middle Georgia. Right now it's at $21. Looks like there's 5 days left on the auction, so I might pick that one up. But I can get it on the eBay's cheaper because at $21 plus shipping, it gets to be more like $40. So once again, Goodwill, I just have to say, stick it! Your prices are getting a little weird. And that copy, the other long box game I'm looking at is Resident Evil. And this is coming from my local Shop Goodwill. Right now, the price is at $51. This auction ends today, so I'm going to keep my eye on this one. It's CIB, but it looks like someone ate fucking dinner off this disc. I'm not sure if the disc is playable. The disc is untested. But I'm going to keep my eye on that. Resident Evil, especially the long box version, that is kind of like a grail in the long box collection. It's a game I've wanted to play for quite some time. So if I get a copy of this, a long box copy, I want a good copy. And this one just doesn't fit the bill. All right, so closing thoughts on WipeOut for the PlayStation. I absolutely loved playing WipeOut. I was really surprised by this. Once again, I've never featured a racing game here on the podcast just because, like I said, basically you just go in circles, memorize the track, and get good. But this one's different. It's got a different soundtrack. It's got different vehicles. The combat's very different. So it was a welcome change. If I see a copy of WipeOut XL, I'll definitely be tempted to pick that up and kind of see what improvements were made with the sequel. But when it comes to racing games for me, racing games are all about like sort of decompression. Get home from work, just tune out and play a racing game, go around in circles, listen to a really good soundtrack and kind of get in the flow. After 2 weeks of playing WipeOut, you can see it over on the YouTubes at 2 Consoles Too Late. I was able to get some progression, and I did finish the Venom class, the first class of races. the first 5 races I could finish in first place, and the last track had some really tight turns that were really hard, even with an Edgicon. But I was able to finish the Venom class. And I was able to get into the flow. But the physics of WipeOut are very different, of course, being an anti-gravity racer. But there's something about a racing game, whether it's, I don't care, pole position, Mario Kart, Gran Turismo, whatever racing game you're playing, you reach a point where you get a clean line and you're not careening off the walls and into other crafts or race cars or what have you, and you start having a good time. And I experienced that with WipeOut, and it was absolutely wonderful. But I think a lot of my progression in WipeOut was helped by this very strange Namco controller, the Negicon. And by the way, I didn't feature it on Shop Goodwill, but there are no Negicons available on the Shop Goodwills. But now that I've played WipeOut and I've acquired a Negicon, I'm going to keep my eye out for this strange controller and any games in this wonderful franchise. All right, so what am I buying? What am I doing? What am I playing here at the podcast? Well, last week I went to an estate sale and I was going for one CRT, and I ended up walking out with 3 CRTs, 2 Sony Trinitrons and a Panasonic. You can check out the pictures over at the Instagrams. Cleaned them all up, tested them. One of them, it worked fine as a retro gaming monitor, but the VCR didn't work, so I just sold that and sent it on its merry way. But I also picked up a Sharp LCD that's sort of a retro gaming monitor, but it's really strange. I went to my local Goodwill. I saw this TV, picked it up for $10. They sell on eBay for like $100, $120. And I thought I was going to flip it. But as I tested it and, hooked the PlayStation 2 up to it, I really liked it. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to keep this one. So I took my that shitty little Toshiba that you see in the Instagrams with the scratch screen and the scratches all over. I gave that away. I sent it on its merry way to another retro gamer who hopefully gets some good use out of that. So that's what I've been buying. And as for the long box collection, it's going. And if you want to hear about that, just check that out over at the Patreon at patreon.com/2consoles2late and the Going Long podcast. As for me, you can check me out on the interwebs. Just go to Google and type in 2 Consoles Too Late, and there I will be. And if you want to support the podcast monetarily, you can do so, and doing so will get you a Miracle of Save States magnet, as well as other goodies, shout-outs on the airwaves, and my appreciation. But as always, have a good one, I love you, and goodbye. WipeOut was developed by Psygnosis, a livable based studio. So Psygnosis